On the most important day of her life, Amanda held her diploma with trembling hands. She had finally made it. She would finally be recognized. But her mother looked at her and said words that destroy a soul. "You'll never be as smart as your brother." 22 years of effort destroyed in a single sentence. What Amanda didn't know at that moment was that those cruel words would do something unexpected. They wouldn't destroy her. They would free her from a prison that had lasted since she was 8 years old. There is a silent pain that millions of people carry since childhood. It's the pain of never being seen, of pushing yourself to the limit and still being invisible, of doing everything right and still not being enough. Amanda knew this pain better than anyone. Since she was a child, she woke up early to study. She did every assignment with care. She dedicated hours to what others did in minutes. But while she struggled for average grades, her brother Christopher got high grades without any effort. And their mother, Susan, never let Amanda forget that difference. Maybe you know someone like this. Or maybe you are that person. The one who always gave their best, but was never recognized. The one who lived in the shadow of someone who seemed to shine effortlessly. The one who heard comparisons their whole life and started to believe there really was something wrong with them. The truth is that our society loves a dangerous lie. The lie that intelligence is measured only by grades. That effort is worth less than natural talent. That some people are born to shine and others to just fail. Amanda grew up believing that lie, and it almost destroyed her life. But this story is not about giving up. This is the journey of a young woman who tried hard until her graduation day, hoping to finally be seen by her mother. But the cruelest words were said at the moment that should have been a celebration. The worst pain became the greatest freedom. And Amanda discovered that a person's worth was never in the grades they get or the approval they receive. Before we begin Amanda's journey, we want to hear from you. What city and country are you watching us from right now? Leave it in the comments. We love knowing who's here with us. Amanda was 8 years old when she learned that her best would never be good enough. It wasn't a lesson that someone tried to teach. It was something she absorbed little by little, like a child absorbs the cold on a winter day without a coat. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything started to make sense to her. Amanda came home from school holding a math test. She had studied for that test for 2 whole weeks. Every afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, redoing exercises. Every morning, waking up earlier to review. She had even asked the teacher for help during recess a few times. And finally she managed to bring home an average grade. She held the paper with both hands, carefully, as if it were something precious. And to her it was. That average grade represented hours of effort. It represented not playing while other children played. It represented waking up earlier to review the material before the test. It represented tears of frustration when the numbers didn't make sense in her head. Susan, her mother, was preparing dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the kitchen. Amanda approached slowly, holding her test as if it were a treasure. "Mom, look, I got an average grade in math." Her voice was full of hope. That fragile hope that children have when they really want the approval of someone they love. Susan looked at the paper. Her eyes quickly passed over the numbers. She didn't smile. She just made that sound that Amanda would learn to hate in the coming years. A sigh that said more than 1,000 words. "That's good, honey." Susan turned her attention back to the stove. "But you know, Christopher got high grades in that same subject when he was your age. And he didn't even need to study as much as you're studying." Amanda felt something break inside her at that moment. It wasn't a loud noise. It was silent, like when a small crack appears in glass. You don't even notice it at first, but it's there, ready to spread. Christopher was her older brother. He was 12 years old and was everything Amanda couldn't be. He brought home high grades without apparent effort. He understood things quickly. Teachers praised him. Susan talked about him with that sparkle in her eyes that Amanda never saw when she talked about her. Have you ever felt that? That feeling that no matter how hard you try, you'll never be enough. That there's an invisible ruler measuring you, and you always fall a little below the mark. Amanda knew that feeling well, and she was only 8 years old. Dinner that night was like all the others. Susan asked about Christopher's day. He told her that the science teacher praised his project, that he was chosen to represent the class in a competition, that classmates asked him for help with homework. Susan smiled. She asked questions. She showed real interest. When it was Amanda's turn, she tried to talk about the math test again. She tried to explain how difficult it was, how much she had studied. But Susan just said it was important to keep trying. Not everyone is born with ease for studies. You're going to need to work twice as hard to get half the results. Amanda didn't fully understand those words that day. She was just a child, but something inside her registered the message. You're not good enough. You need to work harder. And even then, maybe you'll never be like your brother. That night, Amanda went to her room and cried in the dark. She cried quietly so no one would hear. She looked at her notebooks, at the neat notes, at the exercises she had redone so many times, and she wondered what was wrong with her. What Amanda didn't know was that there was nothing wrong with her. The problem was never hers, but it would take years, many tears, and a lot of pain for her to discover that. On the hallway wall, right in front of her room, Susan had placed a frame with all of Christopher's achievements. Certificates, medals, report cards with high grades. Amanda walked past that frame every day. It was the first thing she saw when she left her room. It was the last thing she saw before going to sleep. It was a constant reminder. A reminder that she wasn't like him, that she never would be. The following years would only confirm that pattern. But on that day, at 8 years old, holding a test with an average grade that represented so much effort, Amanda unknowingly planted a seed inside herself. The seed of doubt, the seed of inadequacy, the seed of a question that would follow her for years. Why am I not good enough? Susan wasn't a cruel mother. She didn't hit, didn't yell, didn't mistreat. But there was something more subtle happening. There were constant comparisons. There were different expectations for each child. There was a pattern being created where Christopher was the brilliant son and Amanda was the daughter who needed to try harder. And you know what's saddest? Susan probably thought she was being honest, that she was just recognizing the natural differences between her children. She didn't see what she was doing. She didn't see how each comparison was a small wound in Amanda's soul. She didn't see how she was teaching an 8-year-old child to feel less valuable. Amanda's parents had been separated for years. The father didn't participate in their lives. He didn't call, didn't visit, didn't ask. It was as if he didn't exist. And that made Susan everything to Amanda. The only opinion that mattered. The only approval she sought. The only person she needed to be seen by. And it was exactly from that person that the recognition Amanda so needed would never come. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to grow up feeling like you're not enough? Amanda's story is just beginning, and what comes next will show how much these small childhood wounds can turn into something much bigger. Leave in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible to someone important in your life? Your story matters to us. And if this story is touching your heart, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. If you're watching us from your TV, subscribe to our channel using the QR code that's appearing for you. We have many emotional stories of overcoming and family dramas to share with you, and your presence here makes all the difference. But Amanda still didn't know how much worse things would get before they got better. 4 years had passed, but nothing had really changed. Amanda was now 12 years old, and the crack that started when she was 8 had spread. It was no longer just a thin line. It was a network of small fractures that ran through all of her confidence. Christopher was 16 years old and had become exactly what everyone always said he would be. The best student in school. The brilliant boy. The one teachers used as an example. The one whose name appeared on every honor roll. The living room of the house had turned into a museum of his achievements. Trophies from math Olympics, certificates from science competitions, first-place medals. Every time Amanda walked through that room, it was like walking through a memorial that celebrated everything she wasn't. And the worst part? Christopher didn't need to try, at least not the way Amanda needed to. He studied, of course, But it was different. It was easy for him. Concepts made sense in his head naturally. He read something once and understood it. He solved problems that left other students confused without even having to think much. Amanda, on the other hand, still struggled. She woke up at 5:30 in the morning to review material before school. She stayed up late at night redoing exercises. She participated in all available tutoring classes. She made summaries, mind maps, study cards. She asked teachers for help whenever she didn't understand something. And at the end of all that effort, average grades. Sometimes a slightly better grade when the subject was easier. Sometimes a low grade when the content was too complex. But never the high grades that came so naturally to Christopher. It was a Tuesday night when a moment happened that Amanda would never forget. The family was having dinner. Susan had made lasagna, Christopher's favorite dish. He had just arrived from a state science competition. "Mom, I won first place." Christopher placed the gold medal on the table. His smile was wide, genuine. He was happy, and he had every right to be. Susan practically jumped out of her chair. Her eyes sparkled in that way Amanda knew so well. "Christopher, my son! I knew you were going to win." She hugged him tight. "You're so smart, so special. I'm so proud of you." Amanda looked at her plate. The lasagna suddenly lost all its taste. She had a history test that day. She had studied 2 weeks for that test. She had made summaries of all the chapters. She had even created a timeline to memorize the important dates. And she had gotten an average grade. She had brought the test home wanting to share. It wasn't a high grade, but to her it represented so much effort, so much work, so much sacrifice. But looking at Susan hugging Christopher, at that sparkle in her eye, at that genuine joy, Amanda knew it wasn't worth showing. What was an average grade compared to a gold medal? What was her effort compared to his natural talent? What was she compared to him? "Amanda, aren't you going to congratulate your brother?" Susan looked at her, still smiling. "Congratulations, Christopher." Amanda forced a smile, and she really meant it. She wasn't angry at her brother. Christopher was never cruel to her. He never made her feel small. In fact, he barely noticed what was happening. To him, everything was normal. But for Amanda, nothing was normal. Nothing was fair. Nothing made sense. That night, after dinner, Amanda was in her room doing homework. Math, always math. The numbers danced on the page as if they were mocking her. She had already redone the same exercise 4 times and still hadn't gotten the right answer. There was a knock on the door. Susan came in without waiting for an answer. "Still studying?" Susan sat on the edge of the bed. "Amanda, I need to talk to you about something." Amanda felt her stomach tighten. Conversations that started like this were never good. "I see how hard you try. I really do." Susan spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. "But I think you need to understand something. Christopher has a natural talent. Some people are born that way. They learn easily, they stand out without much effort." Amanda held the pencil so hard her fingers turned white. "You're not like that. And there's nothing wrong with that." Susan continued. "But you need to accept that you're going to have to work much harder to get results that he gets in his sleep. I don't understand why it's so hard for you. You both had the same upbringing, the same teachers, the same opportunities." Those words cut deeper than any knife could cut, because they contained something Amanda was afraid to admit even to herself. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there really was something wrong with her. "I just want you to be realistic, honey." Susan stood up. "There's no point in killing yourself studying if the results don't come. Maybe you should focus on other things. Not everyone needs to be academic." Susan left the room, leaving those words floating in the air like an invisible poison. Amanda sat in the chair, looking at the math exercises, at the summaries scattered on the desk, and at the stacked books. She thought about giving up at that moment. She thought about closing the books, about stopping trying, about accepting that she would never be good enough. It would be so much easier to simply stop trying, stop hoping, stop wanting the approval that would never come. But something inside her, something stubborn and persistent, refused to give up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was hope, maybe it was just the inability to accept that she had no value. So Amanda picked up the pencil again and started the math exercise for the 5th time. From the hallway, she could hear Susan on the phone telling someone about Christopher's medal. Her voice was full of pride, joy, love. Amanda closed her eyes and tried to imagine what it would be like to hear that tone of voice talking about her. But she couldn't imagine it, because it had never happened. And a part of her, a small, sad part, was beginning to believe it never would. The following years would bring more of the same. More comparisons, more disappointments, more nights studying late for results that never impressed anyone. But Amanda didn't know that at 15 years old, something would happen that would make her question everything. A moment that would prove that no matter how hard she tried, it would never be enough for Susan. And this time, the wound would be even deeper. High school brought a pressure she had never felt before. The subjects were harder, the teachers were more demanding. And Christopher's shadow seemed to grow even larger, even with him away from home. Christopher was in college now, 19 years old, studying at a good university, getting excellent grades as always. Susan talked about him in every conversation, with the neighbors, with her friends, with anyone who wanted to listen, and often with people who didn't even want to listen. My son is doing so well in college, very high grades, the professors love him. He's going to graduate with honors, I'm sure. Amanda heard these conversations from the kitchen, from her room, from the hallway. Each word was a reminder. You're not him. You never will be. But Amanda kept trying. God, how she tried. She studied 3-4 hours a day. She woke up at 5 in the morning to review material. She stayed at the school library until it closed. She participated in study groups on Saturdays. Susan even managed to get money to pay for a math tutor twice a week. The tutor was a patient college student named Mike. He explained concepts in many different ways. He used practical examples. He did exercises with her, and Amanda understood there, in that moment, with him explaining. But when test time came, alone with those numbers on paper, everything seemed to disappear from her head. It was as if there was a block, an invisible wall between her and knowledge. She could get close, touch the right answer, but could never cross completely. The grades stayed the same, average. Some low in subjects she had more difficulty with, like chemistry and physics. Some a little better in subjects that were easier for her, like history. But never the high grades that Christopher always had. One Thursday afternoon, Amanda was in her room surrounded by books. She had a chemistry test on Friday. She had studied all week. The tutor had reviewed everything with her. She had done all the exercises in the book. She had even watched videos on the internet explaining the concepts. Susan opened the door without knocking. She looked at Amanda, at the scattered books, at the notes on the walls, at the memorization cards. Still studying chemistry? Susan sighed. That sigh Amanda knew so well. That sigh that said everything without saying anything. I have a test tomorrow, Mom. I see you studying so much, Amanda. Susan leaned against the doorframe. I see the effort you make, the hours you dedicate, the money I spend on a tutor. But where are the results? Amanda felt the words like a punch to the stomach. She looked at her mother, searching for something, understanding, perhaps, empathy, recognition that she was trying. I'm doing my best, Mom. I know you are. Susan crossed her arms. But your best isn't being enough, is it? Christopher never needed a tutor. He never needed to study so much. He simply understood things. I can't understand why it's so hard for you. There was something in Susan's voice. It wasn't anger. It was worse than anger. It was disappointment. It was giving up. It was the acceptance that Amanda would never be what Susan expected her to be. Maybe you just weren't born for this, honey. Susan spoke more softly now, as if being gentle made the words less cruel. Not everyone is smart. Not everyone can do well in studies. And that's okay. You'll find something else. Something that's easier for you. Susan left the room, leaving those words hanging in the air like a sentence. Amanda sat there, in the middle of her books, her summaries, her notes. All that effort, all that sacrifice. And for what? She looked at the mirror on the wall. She saw a 15-year-old girl with deep dark circles. A girl who woke up early and went to bed late. A girl who didn't go out with friends because she needed to study. A girl who had given up hobbies, fun, being a teenager, all to try to be good enough. And she never would be, no matter what she did. She would never be good enough for Susan. The chemistry test on Friday was exactly as Amanda expected. She knew the content when she was studying, but there, in the classroom, with the paper in front of her, everything got confused. She did the best she could. She answered what she could. But she knew deep down, that it wouldn't be a high grade. When the test came back graded the following week, Amanda looked at the number at the top of the paper. Low grade, even with all the effort, even with the tutor, even with the hours of study. Low grade. She looked around the classroom. She saw classmates who had studied the night before receiving high grades. She saw people who hadn't even tried that hard doing better than her. And something inside Amanda started to break in a different way. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of complete inadequacy. That there was something fundamentally wrong with her. That she was defective somehow. That night, during dinner, Susan asked about the test. Amanda lied. She said she hadn't received the grade yet. She couldn't face that look of disappointment again. She couldn't hear another comparison with Christopher. She couldn't handle one more conversation about how she wasn't enough. So she started hiding the tests, hiding the report cards, lying about the grades, because it was easier to lie than to see the disappointment in Susan's eyes. It was easier to pretend than to admit she was failing, not from lack of effort, but from something she couldn't control. Amanda kept studying. She kept trying. But something had changed. She wasn't studying to learn anymore. She wasn't studying to grow. She was studying out of desperation, out of a sick need to prove she had value, to prove she wasn't a mistake. And the more she tried to prove it, the less she believed it. Weeks turned into months. The tutor kept coming. Amanda kept studying late. The grades stayed average or low. And Susan kept making that sound, that sigh that said everything. Have you ever had to hide who you really are from someone you love? Have you ever lied about your struggles because the truth was too painful to share? Leave it in the comments. Your experiences matter. But the worst was still to come. Because at 17 years old, Amanda would face a choice that would define the rest of her life. And for the first time, she would begin to understand that maybe, just maybe, the problem was never hers. 2 years passed like a painful fog. Amanda was now 17 years old and in her last year of high school. The moment every teenager waits for. The moment to plan the future. To dream about college. To imagine who you're going to become. But for Amanda, this moment was different. It wasn't about dreams. It was about reality. And her reality was cruel. She was sitting in the school guidance counselor's office. Mrs. Martinez was a kind woman of about 50 years old who helped students choose colleges. On her desk were piles of colorful brochures from universities all over the country. So, Amanda, let's talk about your options. Mrs. Martinez opened a folder with her school record. Your grades are consistent. Consistent. What a polite word for average. Amanda knew her record by heart. Years of average grades, some low ones scattered here and there. No high ones, no distinction, no awards, nothing that made her stand out among thousands of other students. I know my grades aren't the best. Amanda spoke quietly. She was ashamed of years of effort that led nowhere. Your grades aren't bad, Amanda. Mrs. Martinez smiled kindly. But for the more competitive universities, they might not be enough. Let's focus on more realistic options for you. State universities, community colleges, places where you have a real chance of getting in. Realistic. Another polite word. Another way of saying Amanda wasn't good enough to dream big. Christopher was 21 years old now. He was in his third year at a prestigious university, one of those that appeared on the lists of best in the country. He had gotten in with a full scholarship. His grades in college were as high as they had always been. Professors wrote brilliant letters of recommendation about him. He already had internship opportunities at important companies. And Susan? Susan told these stories to anyone who breathed. Amanda went home that day with a list of universities. None of them famous, none of them prestigious. All of them were good, were respectable, but were common. They were the kind of college for people with average records like hers. She spent the next months applying, writing admission essays where she tried to explain why she deserved a chance, even without impressive grades. Asking for letters of recommendation from teachers who barely remembered her because she was never the best student, just the one who tried hard. The responses started arriving in March, some rejections, some wait lists, and finally, an acceptance. State University, a common but solid college. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't special. Amanda held the acceptance letter in her hands. She should be happy. She was going to college. She had made it. But all she could feel was emptiness. She showed the letter to Susan that night during dinner. She placed the paper on the table with slightly trembling hands. I was accepted at State University. Susan looked at the letter. She picked it up, read it quickly. Congratulations, honey. At least you got into somewhere. At least, 2 words that said everything. At least you didn't fail completely. At least you got the minimum. At least you're not a total failure. For Christopher had so many options at your age, Susan continued, as if she couldn't avoid the comparison. He chose the best one and still got a full scholarship. But you'll be fine at State. It's a decent college for someone with your grades. Amanda felt something die inside her at that moment. It wasn't hope. Hope had died long ago. It was something deeper. It was the last spark of desire for Susan's approval. The last drop of need to be seen, to be recognized, to be valued. I studied a lot. Mom. Amanda spoke, and her voice came out firmer than she expected. I worked hard every day for years. I woke up early. I went to bed late. I sacrificed everything. I know you worked hard. Susan put the letter back on the table. But effort isn't everything, Amanda. Results matter, and your results have always been limited, average, insufficient, disappointing. Amanda had heard all these words in different forms over the years, but they always meant the same thing. You're not good enough. That night, Amanda lay awake thinking. She had never asked to be compared to Christopher. She never wanted to compete with him. All she ever wanted was to be seen for who she was, to be loved for her own merits, not diminished for not having his merits. But Susan could never do that, or never wanted to. And Amanda was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, that wasn't her fault. The following months were preparation for college. Amanda bought notebooks, organized her move, prepared to leave home for the first time. Part of her was excited. College would be a fresh start, a place where nobody knew her, where nobody knew about Christopher, where she could be just Amanda, not the less intelligent sister of someone brilliant. But another part of her was terrified. What if college was the same? What if she tried just as hard and got the same average results? What if the problem really was her? Susan kept making her comparisons until the last day. When Amanda was packing her bags for college, Susan commented that Christopher had taken fewer things because he was more organized. When Amanda was nervous about making new friends, Susan said Christopher had adapted easily because he was charismatic. There was always something. There was always a way to show how Amanda fell short. And Amanda kept trying, because she didn't know how to do anything else, because giving up would mean admitting Susan was right. It would mean accepting that she really was limited, average, insufficient. So she took her bags, her books, her new notebooks full of fragile hope, and went to college. She didn't know that the next 4 years would bring more of the same. She didn't know the pain would get even deeper. She didn't know she was walking toward a moment that would break her completely, but she also didn't know that breaking would be necessary. That sometimes we need to shatter completely to understand we were trying to fit into a mold that was never made for us. College was waiting, And with it, more years of struggle, more years of effort, more years of average results. But there was also something waiting that Amanda couldn't see yet. The seed of her freedom was about to be planted, even if it would take years to germinate. College wasn't the fresh start Amanda had hoped for. It was more of the same, only worse, because now she was alone with her thoughts, with no one to witness her effort. An effort that no one sees seems to have no value at all. In the first days, Amanda looked around campus with a mixture of hope and fear. Students everywhere. Some seemed confident, excited, ready to conquer the world. Others seemed lost like her. But none of them knew who Christopher was. None of them would compare her to him. At least that's what she thought. Classes started, and Amanda went back to old habits. Waking up early, studying late, making and remaking notes, participating in study groups, going to professors' office hours. She dedicated every free hour to studying. While other students went to parties, made friends, explored the freedom of being away from home, Amanda was in the library. And in the end, average grades, some low ones in the harder subjects, never high, never impressive, never enough. In the second semester, something started to happen. Amanda began having anxiety attacks before tests. Her heart would race. Her hands would sweat. She felt like she couldn't breathe right. Even knowing the material, even having studied, panic would take over. She would take a test trembling, and even when she knew the answers, anxiety confused everything. It was as if her brain shut down at the worst possible moment, as if years of pressure, of comparisons, of never being good enough had created a block she couldn't control. The calls to Susan were always the same. Amanda tried to avoid them, but Susan called every week. "How are classes going, honey?" "They're going well, Mom," Amanda lied, or half-lied. They were going, at least. "And the grades? Are you getting good grades?" Silence. That heavy silence that said everything. "Amanda?" "They're average, Mom. I'm passing the classes." There was always a sigh on the other end of the line. Always. Christopher had already published an article at this point in his college career, and with very high grades in all subjects. "Are you at least trying hard?" Trying hard. As if Amanda did anything other than try hard. As if her entire life wasn't a giant painful effort that never led anywhere. "Yes, Mom, I'm trying." "Well, keep trying. Maybe you need to study more, or find a better way to study. I don't know, Amanda. You need to figure out what you're doing wrong." What you're doing wrong. As if there was a secret formula Amanda hadn't discovered yet. As if the problem was lack of effort, lack of dedication, lack of trying. It was never the possibility that Amanda was simply different. It was never the possibility that she had other types of intelligence, other types of value. Amanda started avoiding the calls. She let the phone ring. She sent messages saying she was busy because it was easier than hearing those words, easier than feeling that pain every time. In her second year of college, Amanda developed something she didn't know how to name at the time: imposter syndrome. The constant feeling that she didn't deserve to be there, that it had been a mistake for them to accept her, that at any moment someone would discover she was a fraud. When a professor praised her for something, she couldn't accept it. She thought he was being kind, that he was lying, that he was mistaken. When she got a slightly better grade, she thought it was luck, that the test was easy, that it didn't mean anything. She couldn't see anything good in herself, because Susan had never seen it. And if her own mother couldn't see value in her, how could she? The years in college blended into a fog of obsessive studying, growing anxiety, and results that never changed. Amanda was 19, 20, 21 years old, but felt like she was trapped in an infinite cycle. Effort, disappointment, repeat. She wasn't among the best students. She didn't receive merit scholarships. She wasn't chosen for special programs or research projects. She simply existed. She passed classes. She advanced semesters. She survived, but she never thrived. There were nights when Amanda cried alone in her dorm room She cried from frustration. She cried from exhaustion. She cried because she didn't understand why she couldn't do it. Why, after so much effort, after so many years trying, she was still average, still insufficient, still a disappointment. Her roommate sometimes asked if she was okay. Amanda always said yes. She always lied. How could she explain? How could she say that you're drowning in inadequacy? That you carry the weight of years of comparisons that tell you you're worth nothing? Christopher, meanwhile, kept shining. Susan sent updates by text. He had graduated with honors. He got an amazing job. He was doing very well in his career. Each update was a knife in Amanda's heart. Not because she was angry at Christopher. She wasn't. He never did anything wrong. The problem was never him. The problem was that Susan used each of his achievements as a ruler to measure her failure. In her third year, Amanda tried something different. She tried not to care. She tried just doing the minimum necessary. She tried to stop killing herself studying for results that never came, but she couldn't. There was something inside her, something stubborn and desperate, that wouldn't let her give up. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the last spark of hope that one day, somehow, she would prove she had value. Maybe it was just the inability to accept that Susan was right about her, so she continued. She studied. She tried. She failed. She repeated. And the more she did this, the more she lost herself. She no longer knew who she was outside of studying. She had no hobbies. She had no close friends. She had no passions or dreams. She was just effort and failure. She was just a constant attempt to be good enough that never worked. Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle you can't break? Have you tried so hard for so long without seeing results? Leave it in the comments. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone helps a little. In her fourth year, Amanda was about to graduate, not with honors, not with distinction, just graduate. And she should be happy. She should be proud of having made it that far. But all she could feel was tiredness. Tired of trying, tired of failing, tired of carrying the weight of never being enough, tired of living in the shadow of someone who didn't even know they were casting a shadow. Graduation was coming. And with it, a moment Amanda had been waiting for years. A moment she thought would finally bring the recognition, the validation, the love she had always sought. But what was waiting for her wasn't recognition. It was the deepest wound of all, a wound that would break her completely. And paradoxically, it would be that total breaking that would finally free her. It was 3 months before graduation when Amanda received the official confirmation. She had completed all the credits. She had passed all the necessary classes. She was going to graduate, not with honors, not with distinction, not with any kind of special recognition, but she was going to graduate. Amanda held the confirmation paper and felt something strange. It wasn't exactly joy. It wasn't pride. It was more like relief. Relief that it was finally over. 4 years of struggle. 4 years of effort that seemed endless. And now, finally, it was ending. She called Susan that night. For the first time in weeks, she made the call herself. "Mom, I have news." "What is it, honey?" Susan's voice sounded tired, as always. "I'm going to graduate. The ceremony is in June. I wanted to invite you." There was a pause on the other end. "Of course I'll go, Amanda. It's your graduation." Amanda expected more. She expected enthusiasm. She expected Susan to say she was proud. She expected something beyond an, "Of course I'll go," said with obligation. "Can Christopher come too?" Amanda asked, even though she knew the answer. "I'll ask him. He's very busy with work, you know. But I'll ask. Christopher. Always Christopher." Even in her moment, there was Christopher. The following weeks were strange. Amanda was finishing her last assignments, taking her last tests, closing a 4-year cycle. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think about what would come next. She had applied to some jobs, nothing special. Entry-level positions at medium-sized companies, nothing that required excellent grades or a brilliant resume. Just honest jobs for someone with a common degree and an average record. She had received some responses, some rejections, 1 or 2 scheduled interviews. That's how her life had always been. Average effort, leading to average results, leading to average opportunities. But graduation was different. Graduation was the end of a journey that had been so difficult, so painful. And Amanda, somewhere deep in her heart, still held a fragile hope. The hope that Susan would see, that Susan would understand, that Susan would finally recognize that getting here, with all the difficulties, with all the struggles, with grades that were never high, but with effort that never stopped, that was also an achievement. That also deserved to be celebrated. It was a foolish hope. Perhaps, after years of disappointment, after years of comparisons, after years of never being enough, there was still this part of Amanda that wanted Susan's approval, that needed it. She bought a dress to wear under the gown. Nothing expensive, nothing extravagant, but it was pretty. It was hers. She looked at herself in the dressing room mirror and tried to imagine what it would be like to walk across the stage, receive the diploma, hear her name being called. Would Susan applaud? Would she smile? Would, for a moment, Amanda be seen? The graduation invitations arrived 2 weeks before the ceremony. Amanda took 2. 1 for Susan, 1 for Christopher. She put them in envelopes, wrote the names carefully, and sent them by mail. Along with Susan's invitation, she included a note. It was short, simple. Mom, I made it this far. I hope you can come and share this moment with me. Love, Amanda. Christopher responded first. A brief text message. Congrats, sis. I'll try to be there. Work is crazy, but I'll see what I can do. I'll try. I'll see what I can do. It wasn't a confirmation. But it also wasn't a complete rejection. Amanda accepted it. She always accepted the crumbs she was given. Susan called a few days later. I got the invitation. Of course I'll be there, Amanda. I already marked it on the calendar. Thank you, Mom. Amanda felt something tighten in her chest. Hope. That damn hope that never died completely. Christopher said he'll try to go too. He's very busy. You know how it is. But he'll try. There was always a but. There was always a way to diminish. There was always Christopher being used as the measure of everything. I know I'm not graduating with honors, Mom, Amanda said, and her voice trembled a little. I know I wasn't as brilliant as Christopher, but I made it here. I didn't give up. I know, honey. Susan spoke, and there was something in her tone that Amanda couldn't decipher. Pity? Disappointment? Resignation? You've always been hard-working. Nobody can deny that. Hard-working. Always hard-working. Never smart, never talented, never special, just hard-working. The last week before graduation was intense. Amanda had to return library books, clean out the dorm, pack her bags. It was the end of a chapter, literally. She walked through campus one last time. She looked at the library where she had spent countless hours, at the classrooms where she had struggled with difficult subjects, at the garden benches where she had cried alone more times than she could count. This place had been the stage of so much pain, but also so much persistence. Amanda hadn't shined here. She hadn't stood out. She hadn't impressed anyone, but she had survived. She had made it to the end, and that had to mean something. It had to have some value. The night before graduation, Amanda could barely sleep. She lay awake thinking about the next day, thinking about Susan, thinking about the fragile hope she still carried that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment when everything would change. She mentally rehearsed what she would say to Susan after the ceremony, how she would explain that getting here had been the hardest thing she had ever done, how she would make her understand that grades weren't everything, that effort also had value, that persistence was also a form of intelligence. But deep down, Amanda knew. She knew Susan probably wouldn't understand. She knew there would probably be more comparisons with Christopher. She knew she would probably leave there with one more wound. But she still hoped. Because hope, no matter how painful, is hard to kill completely. The sun rose on graduation day. Amanda dressed carefully. She put on the dress she had bought. She did her hair. She put on the gown. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was 22 years old. She had survived years of comparisons, of inadequacy, of never being enough. And she was there, about to graduate, about to close a cycle, about to have a moment that was hers. Or at least it should be. What Amanda didn't know was that in the next few hours, her last hopes would be destroyed in a way she never imagined. The words Susan would say wouldn't be just another comparison. They would be a sentence, a confirmation of everything Amanda had always feared about herself, but they would also be, paradoxically, the beginning of her freedom. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of graduates in black gowns filled the front seats, families squeezed into the bleachers. The air was full of anticipation, emotion, celebration. It was the day everyone had waited for 4 years. Amanda was sitting in the middle of the crowd of graduates. Her gown was perfectly arranged. Her cap was a little crooked because she didn't know how to adjust it properly. She held the ceremony program with slightly damp hands from nervousness. She looked around. She saw classmates taking photos. She saw families waving from the bleachers. She saw smiles, hugs, happy tears. Everyone seemed to have someone cheering for them. Everyone seemed to belong to that moment of celebration. Amanda searched for Susan with her eyes in the bleachers. It took a few minutes, but she finally found her, sitting in the middle, alone. Christopher hadn't been able to come. Very important work, he had texted the night before. Sorry, sis. Susan saw Amanda looking and waved briefly. She didn't smile, just waved, as if she were fulfilling an obligation, as if she were there because she had to be, not because she wanted to. The ceremony began. The dean spoke about achievements, about the future, about the university's pride. They called some students to the stage to receive special awards, scholarship recipients, students with very high grades, those who had stood out. Amanda wasn't among them. She never would be, and she had made peace with that, or at least she thought she had. Then the diploma distribution began, name by name, one by one. Each graduate walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, received the diploma, posed for the official photo. Amanda waited. Her name was in the middle of the alphabetical list. She watched dozens of people go before her. She watched families screaming with joy. She watched parents crying with pride. She watched mothers standing up to applaud, filming with their phones, radiant. And then it was her turn, Amanda Peterson. She stood up. Her legs trembled a little. She walked toward the stage. She climbed the steps carefully so as not to trip. The dean was there, smiling that professional smile he gave everyone. She shook his hand. She received the diploma. The paper was inside a synthetic leather cover. It weighed more than she expected. Or maybe it was the weight of everything that paper represented. 4 years, countless hours of study, sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, tears of frustration, average results. But she had made it. She was there. She had a diploma in her hand. She posed for the official photo. The flash blinded her for a second. And then she was coming down from the stage, returning to her seat, holding that diploma as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. To her, it was. She looked for Susan again. She wanted to see if she had stood up, if she had applauded, if she had shown any emotion. But Susan was sitting, looking at her phone. She hadn't even seen Amanda on stage. Something tightened in Amanda's chest, but she pushed it down. There was still time. After the ceremony, when they could talk, when Amanda could show the diploma, when she could say, "I did it, Mom. After everything, I did it." The ceremony continued. More names, more diplomas, more celebrations. Finally, after hours, the last name was called. The dean gave the final speech. He talked about new beginnings, about infinite possibilities, about the pride everyone should feel. And now, graduates, you may turn your tassels. The auditorium exploded. Caps flew into the air. Shouts of joy filled the space. Hugs, tears, laughter. It was official. They had graduated. Amanda turned her tassel with less enthusiasm than the others. She looked around. Everyone seemed so happy, so complete, so celebrated. She carefully put away her diploma and went to look for Susan. The reception area was chaotic. Families looking for graduates, graduates looking for families, flowers, gifts, hugs everywhere. Amanda navigated through the crowd, looking for Susan. She finally found her near the exit. Susan was alone, looking at her phone again. "Mom." Amanda approached, holding the diploma. Susan looked up. "Oh, Amanda, congratulations. The ceremony was long, wasn't it?" Long. The ceremony was long. Not, "You did it?" Not, "I'm proud." Just, the ceremony was long. "I graduated, Mom." Amanda held the diploma with both hands, showing it to Susan. "Yes, I saw." Susan looked briefly at the diploma. "Good job." Good job. As if Amanda had finished a household chore. As if graduating from college was something common, something expected, something that didn't deserve real celebration. Other families around were crying with joy, taking hundreds of photos, hugging their children with visible pride. And there was Susan, looking at her phone, giving mechanical congratulations, wanting to leave. "Should we take a photo?" Amanda asked, her voice small, hopeful. "Sure." Susan handed her phone to a stranger who was passing by and asked her to take the photo. They stood side by side. Susan didn't even smile properly. The photo was taken. Susan thanked the stranger and looked at the image. "It came out good. I'll send it to Christopher." Christopher. Always Christopher. Even there. Even in that moment that should be Amanda's, there was Christopher. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something." Amanda gathered courage. It was now or never. "I know my journey wasn't like Christopher's. I know my grades were never the best. But I made it here. I didn't give up. And that has to mean something, doesn't it?" Susan looked at her. And there was something in her look. Something Amanda couldn't fully interpret. Was it pity? Was it impatience? Was it preparation to say something that had been stuck for years? "Amanda, honey." Susan spoke slowly. "Let's talk. But first, let's get out of here. It's too noisy." They walked out of the building. They found a quieter place, a bench under a tree on campus. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves. It should be a beautiful moment. It should be a moment of connection. But Amanda felt something change in the air. She felt that what was about to come wouldn't be the recognition she expected. It would be something different. Something worse. Have you ever waited for a moment of validation for years, only to feel it's about to crumble right in front of you? Leave it in the comments if you've been through this. Susan sat on the bench. Amanda stood, holding her diploma, her heart beating fast. She didn't know why, but she was afraid. A deep, instinctive fear that what would come next would change everything. And she was right. Susan's next words wouldn't be just another disappointment. They would be the final wound, the confirmation of all of Amanda's fears. But they would also be, without either of them knowing, the exact moment when Amanda would begin to free herself. Now, Amanda was standing in front of Susan with the diploma in her hand, her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. Around them, other families were celebrating. Laughter, hugs, joy. But there, on that bench under the tree, there was only tension. Susan looked at Amanda with that look she knew so well, the look that came before comparisons, the look that came before disappointments, the look that said something painful was about to be said. "Mom," Amanda spoke, and her voice came out shaky. "I did it. I graduated. I know it wasn't with honors. I know it took me longer in some classes. I know my grades were never the best, but I didn't give up. I made it here." She held the diploma tighter. 14 years, Mom. Since I was 8 years old, I've been trying. I wake up early. I study late. I work harder than anyone I know. And I know I'm not like Christopher. I know I never will be. But that doesn't mean I don't have value, does it? Her voice broke a little at the end. Tears began to form in her eyes. She was vulnerable, completely exposed, asking, begging for recognition she had sought her entire life. "Are you proud of me, Mom? At least a little?" Susan sighed. That deep sigh Amanda had known since childhood. And then she spoke. "Amanda, honey, I need to tell you something because I'm your mother and I love you." Amanda's heart tightened. When Susan started sentences like that, it was never anything good. "You've always been very hardworking. Nobody can deny that. I see how much you try. I see the hours you dedicate. I know you kill yourself studying." There was a "but" coming. Amanda could feel it. "But the truth is, you'll never be as smart as your brother." The world stopped. Amanda felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her feet, as if someone had stuck a knife in her chest and twisted it. The words echoed in her head, each one like a hammer. "You'll never be as smart as your brother." Susan kept talking, apparently not realizing what she had just done. "Christopher learns things naturally. He gets high grades without effort. You have to work very hard for average results. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's reality." The tears came. Fast, hot, uncontrollable. Amanda couldn't stop them. 22 years. 22 years of effort. 22 years of trying to be good enough. And this was the answer. "You'll never be as smart as your brother." Not "I'm proud despite the differences." Not "you have your own value." Not "effort also matters." Just a clear, direct, devastating sentence. "You'll never be, never." Amanda looked at Susan through her tears, and for the first time in her entire life, she really saw. She saw that Susan would never recognize her, would never value her, would never love her the way she needed to be loved. Because Susan couldn't see beyond grades, couldn't see beyond academic achievements, couldn't see beyond Christopher and Amanda. Amanda would never be Christopher, would never be the prodigy son, would never be the one who shines naturally. She was the daughter who had to work hard, the average daughter, the disappointing daughter, the inferior daughter. But there, in that moment of absolute pain, something unexpected happened. Along with the pain came clarity, a brutal and liberating clarity. The problem had never been hers. Amanda wasn't defective, wasn't stupid, wasn't inadequate. She was different, and different didn't mean less. It just meant different. Susan was the one who couldn't see that. Susan was the one who had created an impossible ruler and used it to measure everything. Susan was the one who had wounded an 8-year-old child and kept wounding her for 14 straight years. And Amanda had spent all that time trying to earn love from someone who couldn't give it, trying to prove her value to someone who would never recognize it, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for her. "Mom," Amanda spoke, and her voice came out different now, firmer, even through the tears. "I spent my entire life trying to be good enough for you, trying to earn your approval, your validation, your love." Susan looked at her, surprised by the tone. "But I finally understood," Amanda continued. "It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how hard I try. It will never be enough. Because you can't see me, you can only see what I'm not." "Amanda, don't be dramatic," Susan started. "No!" Amanda interrupted her. For the first time in her life, she interrupted Susan. "It's not drama. It's the truth. You just told me, on my graduation day, that I'll never be as smart as my brother. You told me that while I was holding my diploma. You told me that after I begged for recognition." Susan fell silent, perhaps finally realizing the magnitude of what she had said. "I worked hard every day for 14 years. Amanda's voice was breaking, but she continued. "I sacrificed my childhood, my adolescence, my mental health, everything trying to be good enough for you. And you never saw me." The tears kept falling, but there was something different about them now. They weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of liberation, of anger, of finally seeing the truth. "Christopher never asked to be used as a ruler against me," Amanda said. "He never did anything wrong. The problem isn't him. The problem was never me either. The problem, Mom, is you." Susan opened her mouth to respond, but Amanda didn't let her. I graduated today. I received my diploma. I'm going to move on with my life, but I'm not going to try anymore to earn something you can't give me. I'm not going to kill myself anymore trying to be someone you can love, because I deserve to be loved for who I am, not diminished for who I'm not. Amanda wiped her tears. She held the diploma with both hands, and she looked at Susan for the last time with that desperate need for approval. But that need had died. There. In that moment, it died with the cruelest words she had ever heard, and paradoxically, that death was a liberation. I'm leaving now, Mom. Thank you for coming. Amanda turned her back. Amanda, wait, Susan called, perhaps finally realizing she had gone too far. But Amanda didn't stop. She walked back to where the other graduates were. She walked holding her diploma. She walked with tears on her face. But for the first time in 22 years, she walked free. Free from the need for approval. Free from the impossible search for conditional love. Free from the prison of trying to be someone she wasn't. The pain was real. It was deep. It was devastating. But along with it came something Amanda didn't expect. Something that would change everything in the coming months. The seed of true transformation had been planted, and it was about to germinate in ways Amanda never imagined. The months following graduation were the most difficult and at the same time the most transformative of Amanda's life. She was 23 years old and was learning to be a completely new person. Or maybe, for the first time, she was learning to be herself. The first weeks were pure survival. Amanda cried a lot. She slept little. She questioned everything. The pain of those words didn't disappear magically. "You'll never be as smart as your brother," still echoed in her head every morning when she woke up. But something had changed. Amanda was no longer trying to prove Susan was wrong. She was trying to discover who she really was without that constant shadow. She had gotten a job 2 weeks after graduation. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that required excellent grades or an impressive resume. It was an administrative position at a medium-sized company. Filing. Organization. Basic customer service. Simple things. And for the first time in Amanda's life, simple was liberating. There were no tests. There were no grades. There were no academic comparisons. There was just honest work that needed to be done. And Amanda, with her years of discipline and effort, was good at it. But work wasn't what transformed Amanda. It was the decision she made a month after graduation. She found a therapist. The first session was difficult. Amanda sat in a comfortable armchair in the small office and faced a woman of about 40 years old named Dr. Hayes. "Why are you here, Amanda?" Dr. Hayes asked gently. And Amanda broke down. She told everything. The 14 years of comparisons. The effort that was never enough. The average grades. The graduation. Susan's words. The pain. The anger. The confusion. "I don't know who I am anymore," Amanda said through tears. "I spent my entire life trying to be smart, trying to be good at academic things, and I'm not. So what's left? Who am I if I'm not that?" Dr. Hayes looked at her for a long moment. Then she asked a question that changed everything. "Amanda, what is intelligence to you? Being good at school, getting high grades, learning fast, understanding complex things?" Amanda answered automatically. "And that's a very narrow definition of intelligence." Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "Intelligence has many forms. Emotional intelligence, practical intelligence, creativity, ability to solve real problems, persistence, empathy, ability to connect with people. All of that is intelligence." Amanda was silent. No one had ever talked about intelligence that way to her. "Tell me something," Dr. Hayes continued. "How are you with people?" Amanda thought. "I think I'm good. People trust me. They tell me things. I can understand what they're feeling even when they don't say it." "That's emotional intelligence," Dr. Hayes smiled. "And how are you at solving practical everyday problems?" "I'm organized. I see solutions other people don't see. I know how to connect ideas in different ways. That's practical and creative intelligence, Dr. Hayes pointed out. Amanda, you spent your entire life being measured by a very specific ruler, a ruler that measures only one type of intelligence. But there are so many other types, and you have many of them. That conversation planted a seed. And in the following weeks, through therapy, Amanda began to see herself differently. At work, things started to happen. Amanda realized she had a natural ability to organize chaotic systems. She saw patterns where others saw mess. She created simple solutions to complex problems. Her boss, a man of about 50 years old named Mr. Roberts, noticed. Amanda, that filing system you created is saving us hours every day. How did you think of that? Amanda shrugged, awkward with the compliment. I just saw a better way to do things. That's talent, Mr. Roberts said. You have a type of practical intelligence that's rare. You don't learn that in a book. It's natural in you. Natural. That word that was always used to describe Christopher, never to describe her. But here was someone using that word for her in a completely different context. Amanda also discovered she was good with people. When coworkers were stressed, they looked for her. When there were conflicts, she could mediate in a way that everyone felt heard. She had empathy. She had an ability to understand emotions and navigate human relationships. None of this was measured on tests. None of this appeared on report cards. But all of this had value, real value, value that made a difference in the world. 3 months after starting work, Mr. Roberts called Amanda into his office. I want to promote you, he said directly. You've been here a short time, but you've already proven your worth. I need someone to coordinate the administrative team, someone who's organized, who understands people, who solves problems. You're perfect for it. Amanda was speechless. A promotion, recognition, based not on grades or diplomas, but on who she really was. I accept, she said, and smiled. A genuine smile, maybe the first in years. Therapy continued. Amanda worked through years of emotional trauma. She deconstructed the beliefs Susan had planted. She learned to value herself by different metrics. And then came the difficult decision. Amanda drastically reduced contact with Susan. It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't for anger. It was for survival. Because every time she talked to Susan, the old wounds opened. Every time, there was a subtle comparison with Christopher. Every time, Amanda left the conversation feeling smaller. So she stopped answering all the calls. She responded to messages briefly and politely. She created distance, healthy boundaries. For the first time in her life, Amanda chose her well-being over Susan's approval. And something incredible happened. Without Susan's constant voice saying she wasn't enough, Amanda began to flourish. She made friends at work. She started a painting hobby she found relaxing. She went out to dinner. She laughed. She lived. Without the constant pressure to prove something, she simply existed. And by existing, she discovered who she really was. Not Christopher's less intelligent sister, not Susan's disappointing daughter, just Amanda, with her own strengths, her own weaknesses, her own value. Have you ever discovered a talent of yours that no one ever valued before? Have you realized you had value in places you never imagined? Share in the comments. Your journey can inspire someone. 6 months after graduation, Amanda was in a completely different place. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. She wasn't a CEO. She hadn't won famous awards. She didn't have a resume that impressed strangers, but she had something more valuable. She had peace. She had self-knowledge. She had the freedom to not need to be anything other than what she was. And she was about to discover that this freedom was exactly what she needed to finally close the cycle, to have the conversation she needed to have, to understand the last piece of the puzzle. Amanda was 24 years old when she received the email that would change everything. Not because it was something grand in the eyes of the world, but because it was something genuine in her eyes. The company was giving an Innovation and Leadership Award, and Amanda had been chosen. Not for grades, not for impressive diplomas, but for the project she had developed in recent months. A system that completely reorganized how the company managed internal communication. Something practical, something useful, something that came from her mind. The award would be presented at a small ceremony, nothing compared to graduation. Just a few employees, some managers, a few words of recognition. And for the first time in her life, Amanda didn't invite Susan. She didn't invite Christopher. She didn't tell anyone in the family. This achievement was hers, only hers, and she didn't need anyone's approval for it to have value. The night of the ceremony arrived. Amanda wore something simple but pretty. She looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a 24-year-old woman who had survived so much, who had broken and rebuilt herself, who had learned to value herself by metrics that truly mattered. The ceremony was exactly as she expected. Small, intimate. Mr. Roberts gave a speech about how Amanda's work had positively impacted the entire company, about how she had a rare ability to see solutions where others saw only problems, about how her empathetic leadership had transformed the team dynamics. Amanda received the award, a small, simple trophy. But when she held it in her hands, she felt something she had never felt holding a diploma or a report card. She felt that it truly represented who she was. After the ceremony, while people mingled drinking coffee and talking, Amanda saw someone she didn't expect to see. Christopher. He was standing near the entrance, tall and uncomfortable in a very well-cut suit. 28 years old now. Successful, established. But there was something different in his face, something Amanda had never seen before. She approached slowly. "Christopher, what are you doing here?" "I saw it on LinkedIn." He spoke, somewhat awkwardly. "About the award. I wanted to come. I wanted to see you. If you don't mind." Amanda looked at him. For the first time in years, she really looked, and she saw not the prodigy brother, not the natural genius, but just a person. Just Christopher. "Of course I don't mind," she said. "Should we walk?" They left the building and walked through downtown streets. It was a cool autumn night. The city lights shone around them, and for the first time in their lives, the two talked, really talked. "Congratulations on the award," Christopher began. "I read about the project. It's impressive, Amanda. You've always been creative in that way. You've always seen things from different angles. Thank you." Amanda held the small trophy. "But you didn't come all the way here just to say congratulations, did you?" Christopher sighed. "No. I came because I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." They stopped at a bench. They sat, and Christopher finally spoke. "I always knew," he began, his voice low. "I always knew what Mom did, the comparisons, the way she treated you versus how she treated me, and I never said anything. I feel guilty about it every day." Amanda was silent, letting him continue. "Do you think it was easy for me?" Christopher looked at his hands. Being the prodigy son, never being able to fail, never being able to be vulnerable, never being able to be just human. The pressure was suffocating, Amanda. "I had to be perfect always, because if I wasn't, I would disappoint everyone. Christopher, I looked at you sometimes," he continued, "studying late, working so hard, and I was envious, because you had the freedom to not be perfect. Freedom to try and fail. I never had that. I had to get it right always." "But you did get it right," Amanda said softly. "The high grades, the awards, the brilliant career. And you think that made me happy?" Christopher looked at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "I spent my entire life doing what was expected of me, never what I wanted. I never explored. I never took risks. Because if I failed, I wouldn't be Christopher anymore. I wouldn't be the perfect son anymore." Amanda felt something shift inside her. She had always seen Christopher as the favored one, the lucky one, the one who had everything easy. But for the first time, she saw his prison, a different prison from hers, but a prison nonetheless. "Mom hurt us in different ways," Amanda said, And there was no anger in her voice, just sadness. She made me feel like I was never enough, and she made you feel like you had to be perfect, always. Exactly. Christopher wiped his eyes. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not defending you, for not speaking out against the comparisons, for being a silent accomplice to all of this. You were a child too. Amanda put her hand on his shoulder. It wasn't your responsibility to fix Mom. They were silent for a moment. Two siblings who had been placed on opposite sides of a competition neither of them asked to participate in. You know what I discovered? Amanda finally spoke. Intelligence isn't just one thing. It's not just getting high grades or learning fast. You have academic intelligence. You're brilliant at that. But I have other things. I have emotional intelligence. I have practical creativity. I have persistence, and all of that has value. You always had value, Amanda, Christopher said. Mom could never see it, but I saw it. I always saw it. I see it now too. Amanda smiled, not a sad smile, a genuine smile. It took me 24 years, a devastating graduation, and a lot of therapy. But I finally see it. Are you happy? Christopher asked. Amanda thought for a moment. She looked at the trophy in her hands. She thought about the work she loved, the friends she had made, the peace she had found, the freedom of not needing to prove anything to anyone. Yes, she answered, and realized it was true. I'm happy, not the way Mom expected me to be, not the way she wanted, but happy in my own way. And that's enough. Christopher smiled. I want that too. That freedom you found. How did you do it? I stopped trying to be you, Amanda said simply. I stopped trying to earn her approval. I stopped measuring my value by the wrong ruler. And I started discovering who I really was. They talked for hours that night. They shared wounds. They shared regrets. They shared hopes. And for the first time, not as the prodigy brother and the average sister, but as two people trying to heal from a childhood that had hurt them both. When Amanda went home that night, she looked at the trophy. Small, simple, but it meant everything. Not because it proved something to Susan, not because it made her equal to Christopher, but because it represented her own path, her own journey, her own value. She placed the trophy on the shelf next to her graduation diploma, and for the first time she looked at that diploma without pain, without shame, just with recognition of everything she had survived to get there. Amanda wasn't the smartest. She never would be. But she was resilient. She was creative. She was empathetic. She was persistent. She was unique. And that was more than enough. She no longer needed Susan's approval. She no longer needed to be like Christopher. She just needed to be Amanda. And finally, after 24 years, she was at peace with that. Amanda's story didn't end with a fairy tale ending where everything worked out perfectly. She didn't become a millionaire. She didn't win world-famous awards. She didn't prove Susan was wrong in a dramatic way. But she achieved something much more valuable. She freed herself. She freed herself from the need for external approval. She freed herself from the prison of trying to be someone she was never meant to be. She freed herself from the belief that her value depended on grades, on academic achievements, on being as smart as someone else. And by freeing herself, she flourished. Not the way Susan expected, but in the way that truly mattered. As herself. The truth Amanda learned through years of pain is a truth we all need to hear. There are many ways to be smart, many ways to have value, many ways to be enough. Our society loves to measure, loves to compare, loves to put people in boxes of successful and failures. But these measures are limited. They capture only a tiny fraction of what makes a person valuable. Persistence is intelligence. Empathy is intelligence. Creativity is intelligence. The ability to get up after falling 1,000 times is intelligence. The courage to be vulnerable is intelligence. The wisdom to set healthy boundaries is intelligence. Amanda had all of this. She always had. She was just being measured by the wrong ruler. And maybe you are too. Maybe you're also trying to prove your worth using metrics that were never made to capture who you really are. Maybe you're also living in someone's shadow, trying to be a version of yourself that doesn't exist. So let Amanda's story be a mirror. A reminder that you don't need to be like someone else to have value. You don't need perfect grades to be smart. You don't need approval from those who can't see you to be enough. You're already enough, exactly as you are. Now we want to hear from you. Which part of Amanda's story touched your heart the most? Have you ever lived in someone's shadow? Have you had to discover your own value after years of being measured by the wrong ruler? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story helped you in any way, if it made you reflect, if it made you feel seen, leave your like. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the soul and turn on notifications. We have so many important stories to share with you, stories that can change the way you see yourself and the world. Remember, you never need to be someone else's version. You just need to be the best version of yourself, and that version is already extraordinary.